When I call your name, every fear is banished from here. When you call my name, I'll come running, running to you. And you say, come to me. Spread your wings, catch the wind, he's carrying you.
Shalom and a Happy New Year. Welcome to the first Jerusalem Dispatch ICEJ UK programme of 2024. And this is the ministry that brings you a closer connection to Israel and the Jewish people. And that's the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem UK. And in this programme, we will be discussing the plans and the vision for the ministry in 2024, but also marking the importance of International Holocaust Memorial Day, as we remember the Holocaust that occurred over 80 years ago. And in this month's programme, I'm joined by Pastor Mark Starbuck, who is the Feast Chaplain for ICEJ UK, together with Tim Collins, who's a Lincoln Regional Leader and the ICEJ's official historian as of now. So gentlemen, welcome to the programme. And Mark, it's great to see you back on the programme. It's always a pleasure to have you on the programme. Just share with us where you were on that fateful day, which was Saturday, the 7th of October, 2023. You were the Feast Chaplain. You were part of the UK delegation to Jerusalem, and you got caught up in what was only described as the worst mass terrorist attack in Israel's history.
Well, hello, Simon. Hello, Tim. And first of all, Happy New Year. May 2024 be an amazing year for you both.
Thank you.
Yes, as you mentioned, part of my role is to be the Feast of Tabernacles chaplain. And that means I get to be the temporary pastor for all the volunteers who come and put on the feast in Jerusalem. And we had finished the 2023 feast the night before. So Saturday morning, the 7th, we were busy with our last devotion. And we were going to have a volunteer barbecue. So we were all getting ready for that. And I was busy just sharing. I'd done a series on Hebrews. And I was just finishing that off when suddenly the sirens went off. And for me, having been in Israel, for 17, 18 years, that was the first time that's in Jerusalem in Israel that I had heard the sirens. And it was, okay, what do we do now? And of course, immediately we were told to go to the bomb shelters, and we spent many hours there on that Saturday with some of the Israeli residents who were at the Yitzhak Rabin hostel, and it was a time where we prayed, where we sang. I think in between the sirens going off, I completed my devotion, and I think for most of us, we never really realized what was going on. We knew that rockets were being fired, but it was only when we got back home. I flew back on the 8th, the following morning, and it was only when we turned on the televisions, BBC and others, to suddenly realize the extent of the tragedy that had happened on the 7th. So, just a sort of a life-affecting moment to say I was there when it started.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that personal testimony of being in Israel on October the 7th. And Tim, warm welcome back to Jerusalem Dispatch. It's been a while, so it's good to have you back. Can you share with us your great passion for medieval history and the very important role that you do for ICEJ UK up in Lincoln and building bridges with the Jewish community, but also helping to rewrite historical wrongs with the treatment of the Jewish people during the Middle Ages?
That's right, Simon. being in Lincoln, I actually live in Lincoln, and it's a very easy place to be a historian. Lincoln is very much like a museum. If you walk up the high street, we have 3 of the only 5 remaining Jewish buildings from the medieval period in our city. We have Jew's House, we have Jew's Court, and we have Aaron's House, Aaron the Jew's House, otherwise known as Norman House as well. And Lincoln has a long history with Jews. It was an extremely significant Jewish centre in the Middle Ages, a very wealthy Jewish city, or Jewish expressions of life in the city, but it also has a very deep root of anti-Semitism, a very, very dark, deep root which affected history and the attitude of England for centuries, right through up till the 1600s.
Great, thank you. And Mark, we know that 2023 was a dramatic year, but show us what a year 2023 was for you personally, but also for the ministry that is the International Christian Embassy at Jerusalem, UK.
Well, I think from an international point of view, it was sort of getting back to a bit of normality after the COVID era, getting back to live events, and of course, the 2023 feast. But from a UK point of view, looking at things from the UK branch perspective, it was great. We were able to hold at least 4 conferences around the country, and then numerous other events in localities like Lincoln, London, the sort of Northwest and Midlands and so on, and of course, prayer days. So fantastic, you know, we were able to sort of get out there and be talking to our constituency, engaging with new communities and so on. Of course, the year really is dominated by what happened on the October 7th. And it's really the last 2 or so months that, in a way, have defined 2023 for us. The raising of money, just such a practical thing, to be able, as a branch, to send £100,000 over to Jerusalem to be used for the relief of people who are dislocated from their homes, just putting food in their hands, just helping them with some of the practical needs that they have. Getting prayer events going, just sort of mobilizing the community around the country to pray. I know down at Millbrook where we are, we had 3 days of prayer and fasting right at the beginning of this sort of time when all of the shock of what had happened in Israel was sinking in. And then, of course, when the protests started happening and people started marching in the streets of London and sort of the whole pro-Palestinian thing, it became important for us as those who love Israel and believe in her purpose in the plan of God to stand up and say, hey, you know, we have a different opinion about things. And so there were other events, some of which, you know, you were involved in. And I think it was so important for the Christian community also to be seen and to be visible on the streets of our cities and in London in particular.
Absolutely. So let's have a look now at an overview of the ministry that is the International Christian Embassy at Jerusalem, UK. And after all, ICEJ UK is your embassy in Jerusalem.
Israel. It is the heart of the Middle East, the most important country in all of human history, and the single most influential place that's impacted your life. It was the home of the prophets, the location that once held the Holy of Holies, and the birthplace of the Gospels. The connection between this land and your heart is undeniable, but you can also be a blessing to this nation by partnering with the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem. Now is an exciting time to be a part of what God is doing in Israel. Biblical prophecy is being fulfilled before our eyes. The Jewish people are returning to their homeland from the 4 corners of the earth, and life has returned to the land itself. And the Holy Spirit has been moving on the heart of Christians, just like you, to be a part, and ICEJ has been there. For more than 35 years, ICEJ has been the direct connection to the land of Israel for Christians all around the world. And together, we are helping the needy, providing shelter for Holocaust survivors, integrating new immigrants, supporting minorities, mentoring youth at risk, and have actively helped 120,000 Jews come home to Israel. These are just a few of the people groups ICEJ is impacting. And with a reach of over 170 nations, the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem has become a leading voice of Christian support and friendship to the Jewish people. So get involved and be a blessing to the nation and the people of Israel. The International Christian Embassy Jerusalem. Your embassy, your voice. Join us today.
And that's a great overview of the ministry that is ICEJ UK. And why don't you get involved? If you have a love for Israel and the Jewish people, why don't you show your practical love and support by getting involved in the ministry in 2024? Tim, will you share with us how ICEJ UK has been able to help to equip and educate the church regarding God's biblical plans and purposes for Israel in 2023?
One of the main initiatives, as Mark mentioned, was our regional conferences, and I'd encourage everybody to get involved in those, to look at the ICEJ website and see where they are. We had a regional conference in Lincoln, a very successful one. It was a conference and prayer conference as well with Tom Craig, and we had quite a number of Christians we didn't know who had a love for Israel. After that came forward, we were able to form a small group, and from that we were able to give information about the ICEJ and about subsequent events from that. We had a prayer meeting for the hostages in November, and from that a number of Christians came forward with messages of support for the Jewish community, the local Jewish community and the national Jewish community. And we had one family send an extended photograph of their extended family of over 20 members, saying, "We support you, we want to walk with you, we want to support you, and we're with you." And that was such a blessing for the Jewish community, even in our city, because many of them were feeling it, because the Jewish community came back to us and said, "We've got members of our community who have relatives who are either serving in the IDF, or even some who even held hostages." So it's so important for the Christian community to show their support for the Jewish communities in their areas, and we're able to do that through the ICEJ.
Yeah, wonderful. And Mark, it's times when we have tragedies like we had on Saturday the 7th of October, where we saw literally the gates of hell unleashed against those southern communities in the south of Israel. And of course we all know about the crimes of genocide or pogrom that took place there. But share with us how it's times like this that the ministry of ICEJ UK come into its own by really helping Israelis in a practical way, by showing them that love and the support through a number of different projects and programs that really does show the Jewish people and the nation of Israel that they're not alone during this very dark chapter in their history.
Well, Simon, branches of the ICEJ exist really to support the work in Israel and the headquarters that is based in Jerusalem. So we would take our sort of prompt, as it were, from the office in Jerusalem. And so the first response that we got from Jerusalem was really a theological one. And I can remember Dr. Jürgen Bühler sharing with us from Jerusalem a sort of a theological perspective to what was going on. Very powerful thought as he spoke about Amalek and how the Amalekites, the spirit of Amalek has almost been like a sort of a furnace of anti-Semitism, and reference some of the biblical moments where Amalek has been involved in trying to kill the Jewish nation or kill Jews. And one of the references that he made was, of course, to Haman, who was an Agagite and therefore a descendant of the king of the Amalekites. and says that we are, as the church and as a ministry, ICEJ, are in an Esther moment. And you remember how Haman wanted to kill the Jews, and how Mordecai says to Esther, you know, maybe you've come to the kingdom for such a time as this. And so that was the first response, to sort of say to the branches around the world, this is an Esther moment. This is a moment for us to come before the king and to speak up on behalf of Israel. And from a practical point of view, the way in which we understood that was that we needed to be raising funds, which I mentioned a moment ago, that we needed to be calling our constituency to prayer, and of course that we needed to get out on the streets where we could and engage with the Jewish community, with those who are for or against Israel, and just be sort of, as it were, holding up you know, a voice of love and support for the Jewish people at this time.
Absolutely. So let's see how the ministry of ICEJ is actually helping with those Israelis who've been evacuated from the south of Israel and also the north, which over 200,000 Israelis have had to find new homes because of the security situation from Hezbollah in the north and, of course, Hamas in the south.
Shalom everybody, I'm coming to you from Kibbutz Be'eri. This is just a few hundred meters away from the Gaza Strip, and on October 7 here in this community, as you see, Hamas terrorists entered that community. They killed 10% of the population here, and a very similar carnage took place in many other communities around the Gaza Strip. People who lived here, you can see they have been traumatized. It used to be a paradise on earth, they called it. It used to be a place where young families from all over Israel decided to come and move here because it was such a paradisic or such a beautiful way to live here. And today this is an empty place, a place of destruction. All the families that were living here, they moved out from Kibbutz Be'eri, and they are today evacuees spread all across Israel. The Christian embassy is here on the ground in Israel to help the people who were traumatized by this incredible carnage. And we want you to look at what the Christian embassy is doing in order to help the residents of this war-stricken community here in Israel.
In these very difficult and painful days, ICEJ is here on the ground in Haifa with some of our staff from Jerusalem and from Haifa, representing many different countries, in order to stand with Israel. They do it in a very practical way today. We're just packing all kinds of toys that we will bring soon to places where evacuees are from the south. Haifa actually took many in from the south, and they're staying in all kinds of places in different schools, and the people came with nothing, and there are many children. So we want to give a little bit of joy to the children today when we go soon, to bring it to them, to bring those toys. And we want to stand with Israel in this very, very difficult time. And we want to be your hands and feet. I'm sure you would love to have been here and do something, but you can. Just fill our hands so we can continue to do the work that we need to do also in the time to come.
We're here with the ICEJ in Haifa and giving food and drinks to these wonderful people, a family from Ashkelon, and support them and stand with them at this very difficult time.
We brought a team from the Christian Embassy here today to Kibbutz Shephaim along the central Israeli coast. It's a beautiful, flourishing setting here, this kibbutz, but they've taken in the survivors, 135 families from Kfar Aza, this fellow kibbutz on the Gaza border, which is one of the worst hit of all the communities there. And we've come to talk to some of them and meet them and help them out.
It's been so devastating, really, David, hasn't it, to hear the stories Our hearts are so grieved together with the people at this time. And we want to do something practical to assist. We know that there's so much that's going to need to be done. But today we brought encouragement and practical help for those who have lost their homes. Their lives are shattered. They came here, many of them, with just the clothes on their back. And so today we're going to be giving out practical assistance so that they can go and meet some of those basic needs. And that's just the beginning. We promised today, didn't we, David? We're going to stand with them and we're going to help them rebuild their lives.
I believe you have been touched like me to see the need of those Israelis that have been living here in this area and are spread all over Israel. They really need your help. They need your help to rebuild their lives. They need your help to deal with the trauma that they experienced here in this war-stricken community. And we just ask you to prayerfully consider to stand with the Christian Embassy as we are standing with the evacuees here, not only from Kibbutz Be'eri, but the entire Gaza envelope communities. I look forward to hearing from you. God bless you. Hear from the Gaza envelope communities.
We can't even begin to imagine what it's like for those families of those kibbutzes that were destroyed close to the Gaza Strip, such as Kibbutz Be'eri or Kibbutz Kfar Aza, which faced the worst of the Hamas terrorist attacks on October the 7th. That's why we're going to show our love and support and appreciation for them as they try and rebuild their lives after the devastation caused on October the 7th. Mark, we've reflected a little bit on the horrific event, and of course everything is within the prism of October the 7th. But as we look forward to 2024, what would you say are the biggest challenges, threats and opportunities facing Israel, but also the Ministry of ICEJ UK in 2024?
Well, I think starting with the last part of your question, it's obviously a difficult time to be a ministry that loves and supports Israel. Because it does put us, shall we say, in a minority sort of field. There's not a lot of love being expressed for Israel at the moment. But from a biblical point of view, we believe this is where we need to be, and so we're confident that God is going to help us. But looking ahead and thinking about Israel and what she faces as a nation, there are some really troubling things emerging. First of all, the evident threat of Hamas and Hezbollah, the Iran situation, all of the Middle East, the whole potential for a regional war, if not a world war. That has to be a huge threat. But the thing that I think has shocked us, I mean horrific, is to see what's been happening, say, on our university campuses. And some of the statistics that I have are more based around American universities. But in a sort of a census of 18 and to 22-year-olds, they were asked a couple of questions, one of which was, were the actions of Hamas on the 7th of October justified? And more than 50% said yes. The second question was, should Israel exist as a nation? And again, more than 50% said no. So we are looking at the future leadership, you know, the business people, the doctors, the lawyers, the professors, the teachers, who are 18 and 22-year-olds at university now, already looking at a world in which Israel should not exist. To me, that's a horrific thing. It's almost as if we've lost the argument in terms of these younger people. The third thing, of course, is the hardening of attitudes among the nations. We see this in the UN votes and decisions that have taken place, and this push toward the two-state solution. And that is going to be absolutely unacceptable to Israel. And I can just see the world ganging up against Israel. Now, of course, from a biblical point of view, that is consistent with the picture that we see. But still, it's a sobering thought to think that we're now in that very place that we read about in Zechariah and Revelation.
Absolutely. And Tim, isn't it time also that the church woke up? I mean, I don't know about you, but some of the lies, the conspiracy theories that are all coming up surrounding October the 7th are just absolutely horrific. I mean, one example was actually told that the IDF carried out the attacks on the kibbutzes and the attacks on the Nova Music Festival with the partygoers there. And this was done as a pretext to invade Gaza, and Hamas only carried out a small attack on that day. So it's imperative, even as Christians, to understand truth, but understand the truth of Israel and the prophetic call of the nation of Israel and the Jewish people in light of Scripture, so that we have a biblical understanding.
That's right, Simon. There's, as you say, there's so many false narratives and going around, and false narratives are nothing new. They're centuries, millennia old about Israel and Israel's right to exist. And many churches are actually having the questions asked, and pastors are having to answer the difficult questions now and having to face and wake up to their churches saying, what is going on in Israel? What about the end times? Are we in the end times? And there's so many eschatological teachings going on as well. For churches and Christians, I would say, keep it very simple. And for me, I would say, have a look at Genesis 17. With new eyes afresh. Genesis 17:18, God's promises to Abraham at the very beginning. He says, I will give to you and your offspring after you the land of your sojournings and all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession for you. And that's a good starting point for churches and pastors to start at. But I would also say, have a look at the most famous, most oft-quoted verse in the New Testament, John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that so whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. And in that thoughts and meditation on the word everlasting, then look at that word everlasting and apply it to the Genesis 17, where God says, I'll give it Israel to you and the land of Canaan to the Abraham and his children as an everlasting possession. What everlasting means for one is everlasting for the other.
Amen. And Mark, on Friday, the 27th of January, will mark International Holocaust Memorial Day, and this will be the 79th anniversary of the liberation of the Nazi death camp known as Auschwitz-Birkenau by the Soviet Red Army. How vital is it that we continue to mark this occasion and raise awareness of the horrors that occurred during the Holocaust? And, you know, so many of our world leaders back in the aftermath of the Holocaust vowed never, never again. But sadly, since October the 7th, that seems very hollow with this rise of Jew hatred that we're seeing in our country and throughout the world today.
Well, I think, Simon, from a point of view of God loves all people, our basic response to any prejudice, any hatred, any racism is to say that's inconsistent with, our message and the grace of God. But when it comes to the Jewish people, there is something particular about that. And this is because God is in a covenant with that nation. And we sometimes as Christians forget that our roots are Jewish, that their God is our God, their Messiah is our Messiah. And as someone once said, that anti-Semitism may start with the Jews, but it will eventually get to the Christians. I think there was a saying, is it starts with the Saturday people and then it ends with the Sunday people. So this is a spiritual battle. It's a spiritual war. And we can't just ignore it. We can't just say, oh, well, the Jews are the Jews. This is our people. This is our root. We are, as it were, grafted in to this tree. So we can't just ignore it. And celebrating and acknowledging the International Holocaust Day is, in a way, affirming and reminding ourselves that this is important. You know, the Word of God says, comfort ye, my people. And this is a time for us to do that, to stand up and be counted. So we're in a time where we need to be seen, not just heard.
Absolutely. And Tim, Holocaust education is so important. I mean, this is the paradox that we're living in. For example, there's more films made about the Holocaust, the Nazi era, the persecution of the Jewish people by the Nazis and the Holocaust. There's books, there's novels, there's documentaries, there's Holocaust survivors' testimonies and stories, even though that there are very few left. There are still a few of those around. And yet, with the time of unprecedented Holocaust information and facts about what happened over 80 years ago, it seems that we have a huge rise of Jew hatred. Can you explain the paradox a little bit?
I think what would it actually be like without all the Holocaust Memorial remembrances and all the information about what actually has happened? What would it be like without that? There'd be no foundation of remembrance, no education. It's so important for us to remember. And at the ICEJ commemoration in November of the Association of Jewish Servicemen, the Board of Deputies chairman actually said the greatest act of mitzvah is remembrance. The greatest commandment is to remember so we can educate. There are so many false narratives going around, Holocaust denial. It's so important more and more that we inform people. A new generation after generation can be told and remember what went on to counter all the denials of what is actually happened.
Absolutely. So let's have a look now at the Vice President of ICEJ in Jerusalem. This is David Parsons talking about the Holocaust at the International Holocaust Memorial event in Israel.
Hello everyone, we're coming to you from Haifa, where we've just held a ceremony to mark International Holocaust Remembrance Day. This is a day set aside by the United Nations, the European Union, that all over the world people would remember the Holocaust, honor those who perished, and celebrate those who were heroes and who have survived it. We had quite a few Holocaust survivors here this evening. Every January 27th, we should be thinking about the Holocaust, remembering it, learning more about it, telling others. And we really had a good evening tonight with the Foreign Minister of Israel, Eli Cohen. We had 3 other members of Knesset here. And of course, our friend Shimon Sabag, who helps us, partners with us in the Home for Holocaust Survivors in Haifa. We had a lot of these dear survivors with us this evening, and it was so great to have them all. How are you, my dear? Many of them we helped rescue out of the Ukraine this year and put some of them in the home. They were fleeing the war. We got them out from some of these bombed out cities, and they're now living up here in the Haifa home. And we just want to encourage you, Friday, January 27th, today, take a moment to pray for Israel, pray for the Jewish people, remember the Holocaust, maybe watch a video, a documentary or something, a movie about the Holocaust to educate yourself better and to tell others and make it a habit. Every year, don't let this day go by without honoring those who perished in the Holocaust. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
You are the warrior.
Sadly, there are not many Holocaust survivors left, and that's why it's imperative that we show them love and support and comfort. And it's so important that we also mark International Holocaust Memorial Day, which falls on January the 27th. Now, you've got a fascinating story to tell us, and I know that Dr. David Elms will be very excited for you to share this for the first time with our viewers. And this is the incredible story of the Lincoln Jewish Memorial Stone. Tell us what this stone is and its significance, and the great plans that you have for it, and how the Lord really unpacked this upon your heart.
It really started at a ICEJ prayer day in Lincoln in 2020, just before lockdown. Attending was one of the Jewish leaders of Lincoln, and there was a presentation on the Jewish community of Lincoln, the historical medieval Jewish community, where it was about the blood libel. Blood libel was actually ratified and sanctioned in Lincoln by both the king, the then King Henry III, and the church, where they sanctioned the blood libel, where a boy was found dead in a well, and it was said that the Jews had actually done this to drain the boy's blood, and blood libel then was sanctioned at Lincoln, and a memorial was placed in the Lincoln Cathedral, a big shrine, in memory of this boy, glorifying the blood libel. And this spread throughout the Christendom and Lincolnshire and the whole of the country. And the Jews from that point in time were no longer under protection. A great wave of anti-Semitism helped. And we felt at that time it would be wonderful for there to be a memorial to the Jews in stone to commemorate the Jews that were killed as a memorial. And here we see a picture of this stone. And we didn't have a memorial, we didn't have a design, we didn't have the money, but through my connections in the quarrying industry, I struck up a connection in the week of International Holocaust Memorial Week in 2022 with Phil Kerry of Goldholm Stone Ancaster, and he immediately volunteered that he would provide a memorial stone. And it was to be modelled on the Magdala stone, which was found at Migdal in 2009.
Amazing. And Mark, share with us from a biblical, spiritual perspective how vital it is for Christians to rewrite a new chapter in Jewish-Christian relations, particularly as we know, for example, the horrors that occurred in this country during the Middle Ages, pretty much carried out by the church against the Jewish people, that actually drove them out with the command of Edward I in 1290 from the UK, and didn't return until Oliver Cromwell.
This is the dark part of Christian history, isn't it? The terrible atrocities that were committed in the name of the church and in the name of Jesus. And very few people realize that during the Crusades, more Jews were probably killed than Muslims. As the crusading armies moved through Europe on their way to the Middle East, they were just slaughtering Jewish communities. And so what we've just heard about in Lincoln from Tim is consistent with the story of the church, where the Jews became the object of hatred, of prejudice, and were persecuted. Now, we cannot rewrite history, but I think we can do a couple of things. Number one, acknowledge it. As someone said, denial is not a river in Egypt, honey. And this is a problem that we have, is we don't want to admit these things happened. I think we need to confess and say sorry, that these things did happen. But then we need to commit never to see them happen again. And I think this to us is part of the ministry of ICEJ, to speak out and speak up against prejudice and hatred, and to say never again. So we're thrilled about this stone project, the Magdala stone, because it just sends a message. We haven't forgotten. We are not going to let it happen again.
And Tim, share with us the response of the Jewish community to the presentation of the Lincoln Jewish Memorial Stone, particularly during this time of rising Jew hatred, and that kind of sign of friendship between the Christian community and the Jewish community as well.
We had our first viewing of the stone last week with the Jewish leaders of Lincoln, and it was just so heartrending. The sense of love that was between us, and they were just looking at the stone. It was almost like they couldn't believe that the Christians were presenting them with this beautiful memorial. It's a beautiful stone, and we're now preparing for its formal presentation and its formal sighting in the city of Lincoln, which is yet to be unveiled.
Excellent. And Mark, share with us why it's so important as Christians that we do mark International Holocaust Memorial Day, and we do reach out to the Jewish community who are feeling very vulnerable and very scared, particularly after what happened after October the 7th. And and it's so important, particularly in this climate of hate as well, to show that love and support.
And I would say, Simon, that is probably one of the most significant aspects of this. Yes, we do need to acknowledge the past. We do need to confess, our sense of sorrow for it. But I think there's a message that needs to be spoken today. The Jewish community is feeling very isolated, very vulnerable, very lonely. You think of what it must mean to them to see the thousands and thousands of people marching down the streets of London and many of our major cities. And I don't want to say that they're spewing hatred, but they're certainly not making it comfortable.
I would say they're spewing hatred. I got caught up in that. Chanting, that Palestine will be free.
Well, there you are. But it's making our Jewish friends feel incredibly uncomfortable, incredibly unwelcome in the UK. And I think just Christians to stand up, whether it's with the stone, whether it's with prayer support, or whether it's with just marking the day, says, hey, we're with you. You're not alone. I love some of the T-shirts you see in the sort of souks of Jerusalem. And one of them says, don't worry, Israel, America is behind you. Well, I'm not so sure about that anymore, but I wish there was a T-shirt that said, don't worry, Israel, the Christians are praying for you.
Amen. I'm standing with you as well, which is great. And Tim, I love having historians on the programme as well. And we're now entering into kind of my real domain of passion and interest, and that's particularly with RAF Bomber Command. Share with us the importance of Lincoln to the RAF during those such important bombing raids that were with those famous Lancaster bombers that took off from Lincoln during the Second World War to target the industrial heartland of Nazi Germany, to bring the German war machine to a halt. But also the role played by Jewish servicemen during the Second World War, and many of them served in the RAF.
Not many people will know, but Lincolnshire is actually called Bomber County because of the number of World War II runways, and it actually had more than 50. I've had the privilege of actually going around most of them as part of my job. But as part of the RAF's efforts in World War II, more than 20,000 Jewish servicemen from the United Kingdom served in the Royal Air Force and in Bomber Command. Wow. And over 600 gave their lives in Bomber Command of Jewish servicemen. That's nearly the number was 6% of the entire Jewish population of the United Kingdom, excluding those from the Commonwealth countries like Canada, New Zealand, South Africa and others.
And we also get to know incredible stories of incredible bravery and courage. I mean, one particular was a Jewish gunner, which in the Lancaster bomber, to be in those machine guns at the back of the Lancaster bomber was the most vulnerable place of anyone on the plane. And to know that they were told that they were Jewish, and many of them wore a Star of David around their necks, and many of them would still have their Jewish names on their ID tags or their dog tags. And they were proud to say, I'm a British Jew and I'm fighting the Nazis, knowing what would have happened if their bomber got shot down by German flak or German aircraft and they survived and they were captured at the hands of the Nazis. Just show with us that incredible courage shown by those Jewish personnel who served so bravely and with so much courage during the Second World War for the Royal Air Force.
Yeah. As Tim said, this is not a story we hear a great deal about, that there was this contingent of Jewish airmen, not just from the UK, but indeed from many parts of the world, who came to be part of the fight against Hitler and the Third Reich. And in fact, the RAF Museum has a section entitled Hidden Heroes, which actually details some of the stories of these airmen who not only participated in the bomber missions, but also in the Battle of Britain, where there were Jewish airmen who played a crucial role in the defense of London and England. And many say it was the Battle of Britain that sort of turned the tide of the war. So we're incredibly thankful to these Jewish airmen and women who came literally to lay down their lives for our freedom.
No, absolutely, which is incredible, and it's a story that we need to unpack more and more. So you will be back, Tim, to unpack this, that's for sure. And just also share with us, I think it's important as well, as we reflect upon the Holocaust as well, that this was, you know, the darkest chapter in Jewish history, that over 6 million Jewish people were murdered on an industrial scale by the Nazis. And again, sadly today, we see the situation in the Ukraine with the Russian invasion in the Ukraine, that Holocaust survivors have been caught up in this war, and that the members of ICEJ are going out of their way, putting their lives on the line and risking their own lives to save these remaining Holocaust survivors and bring them home to Israel. Just share with us how important and significant this is, as those Jewish people are incredibly vulnerable in the Ukraine.
It's incredibly significant, and as we've heard, ICEJ have got partner organisations actually searching through Ukraine to try and find these remaining Holocaust survivors who are not only they suffered the original Holocaust in the 1930s, and now they're suffering another Holocaust. And may I just read something said by a lady called, and her husband, Mila Chiporniak, aged 93, and her husband, Samuel, aged 94, who were actually rescued from Ukraine. And she says this: "I was born in Kyiv when the city was constantly bombed by Germans. In my life, I never thought the Russian people would attack Ukraine. Now it feels like history repeats itself, and even worse." And upon being found and saved and taken to Israel, she says, "I have no words to express my gratitude. I do not know how these angels from heaven suddenly came to us. I do not know them at all. It is obvious how they risked themselves under heavy fire. I thank God for sending these rescuers."
Amazing, isn't it? It's
Amazing.
absolutely incredible. And share with us, Mark, about the home for Holocaust survivors that ICEJ have in the north of Israel, which is in Haifa, and the outreach to these very precious people that have gone through horrors that none of us could possibly even comprehend, and yet they're the most brightest, the most people that really love and celebrate love and life as well.
It seems almost unthinkable that 25% of the 165,000, and that's a figure from 2022, Holocaust survivors, that 25% of those people would be living in poverty, be living in a situation where they can't have a dignified life, where they can't afford some of the basic necessities. And so ICEJ became aware of this in the early 2000s, and I think if my memory is correct, in 2007 they began a partnership with a charity that existed in Haifa that was trying to sort of help some of these Holocaust survivors. And they said, well, let's do this together. And really interesting that the first property that became the original Haifa home for Holocaust survivors was funded and refurbished by the ICEJ German branch. And to me, just an amazing little thought that there were ICEJ supporters and partners from Germany that painted the walls, fixed the plumbing, and made that first home suitable for these Holocaust survivors. Now, as we look at it all these years later, there's a whole street of homes and numerous buildings, and these have become safe places, communities where these elderly, many of them in their 90s, are looked after, are fed, are given all the love and support that they need. And it's done in the name of the Christian community worldwide.
Wonderful. And we also have to mention a special mention to Pastor John Hemis, who loves to go out there each year with a team and redecorate some of these homes for Holocaust survivors as well. So we know John's doing a great job. But let's have a look and see the impact that ICEJ UK is having on Holocaust survivors. And this is called Remembering Yom HaShoah with Holocaust Survivors in the ICEJ home in Haifa.
It's Holocaust Memorial Day today. It's a heavy day, it's a difficult day, and at 10 o'clock all of Israel stopped in order to remember the 6 million Jewish people that perished during the Holocaust. Here in Haifa we have a ceremony, and at the ceremony we have people from the government, members of Knesset, all kinds of dignitaries, but besides that also our young soldiers and policemen that come here to remember and to stand with these Holocaust survivors at this very difficult day. We would love to give you a little taste of what it is to remember.
התכנסנו כאן ברחבת יד לניצול בחיפה כדי לחזור ולשנן את המשפט לעולם לא נשכח, לעולם לא נסלח. אנו עומדים כאן במקום שבו הקים מייסד העמותה מר שמעון סבג את עמותת יד עזר לחבר, שהיא בית חם לניצולי שואה, ל100 ניצולי שואה, כ100 ניצולי שואה שמתגוררים כאן עם מיטב התנאים ומברכים על המקום.
התכנסנו שוב פה היום לזכר כל אלה שנשפו בשואה, ותודה לאל שנוכל לחוות את זה הפעם ביחד. היום הקשה הזה. אני יודעת שאתם, ניצולי השואה היקרים, שאתם כבר הדליקו את הנרות שלכם, נרות זיכרון אתמול בערב, ושהיום הזה זה יום קשה, והאובדן והכאב העמוק, שזה לא רק היום, אבל זה כל הזמן איתכם. אני רוצה לחבק אתכם ולחזק אתכם.
After the ceremony, we had a wonderful opportunity to sit with two of our survivors and with some of those beautiful soldiers and to ask them what this day actually means to them, what it means for them to remember and why it's important.
למה בשבילך יום השואה חשוב?
בגלל שיש לנו מדינה, איפה נלך אנחנו? אנחנו צריכים לשמור על מעט שיש לנו, אנחנו לא הרבה, ועוד הולכים, ונהרגים חיילים, ותאונות דרכים, ואנשים מבוגרים, וכל פעם פחות, פחות, פחות. עכשיו, אם הצעירים לא יאמינו, אז הם ילכו בצד אחר. אז מה נשאר? כלום.
מתי אתם חושבים בעצם זה חשוב להיות פה היום ביום השואה? למה זה חשוב בשבילכם?
קודם כל, אני וזוהר, זוהר היא החיילת שלי. אנחנו פעם ראשונה נמצאות פה. אני חווה את יום השואה כבר 3 שנים בצבא, זוהר פעם ראשונה. ואני מרגישה שיש לי, נפלה בחלקי הזכות מאוד מאוד גדולה להגיע לפה היום. לא ידעתי על קיומו של המקום הזה, יש לציין. אני גרה בחיפה, בסביבה, ולא ידעתי שזה קיים. אז קודם כל, ברגע שאני יודעת, ואני שלחתי למשפחה שלי, והמשפחה שלי שלחה לחברים, אז קודם כל ככה כולנו, כל המעגל הזה הגדול שהוא רק מתעצם ומתעצם, יודע על המקום הזה ויכול להגיע לפה. בין אם זה להגיד שלום, ובין אם זה לשוחח, אפילו 5 דקות, זה מצווה, זה מצווה. כי פשוט אסור לנו לא לשכוח, תמיד לציין ותמיד להגיע לפה. להגיע לפה ולכל הארץ בכלל. כמו נעמי יש עוד, וצריך להנציח כל רגע ורגע בחיים האלה כשהם פה.
I so want to thank all of you out there for your wonderful help so that we can do the work that we do here in Haifa with Holocaust survivors. It's only because of you that we can do it. And I want to tell you, please remember what happened so that we can learn from the past and we can really build together, Jews and Christians, a much better future. Thank you.
And I don't think there's a greater work than supporting the work of Holocaust survivors by giving that love, support and encouragement and showing them that Christian love and building that new relationship to say that Christians failed you in the past, but they're not going to do it today. Tim, we only got a few minutes left of the programme, but just share with us how vital it is for our viewers watching this programme today of how they can get involved with the ministry that is ICEJ UK and being a blessing to Israel and the Jewish people, particularly at this very difficult time in Israel's history.
I'll say first of all, pray, you know, and connect with ICEJ UK. Do whatever you can to support the Jewish communities in your area. Send a message of support to our ICEJ UK office. It's on the website, which will be forwarded to the Jewish communities. It's so valuable. But just that connection, and then and ask how you can help. This is their Esther moment. It's an Esther moment for every Christian in this difficult times for Israel.
Absolutely. Mark, for Christians watching this programme today, it's imperative, isn't it, that they are not indifferent, they're not apathetic to the plight of Israel. And we know that Israel is in a battle for her survival because Hamas poses an existential threat. We haven't even touched Iran or Hezbollah in the north. But how can Christians get involved and make a difference for Israel through the ministry that is ICEJ UK?
Well, I think the first thing that I would say, Simon, is get onto our mailing list. So go up onto the website, see the sign-up options there. Get onto our mailing list. You get the email updates, and this will tell you about, projects that we're committed to, stuff that you can be involved with, and of course, events that we're holding. So that to me is really critical. I would say, as Tim has said, become part of the prayer family, the global prayer network that is supporting Israel at this time. But the third is give. A very practical way of just send something that can be sent over to Israel to bless these people. And I would add one final thing is, why don't you plan this year, 2024, to go to Israel? Go on one of our tours, come to the feast, come and volunteer and serve at the feast. And I'll be your chaplain for the time that you're there. But I think these are fantastic practical ways in which people can come and show their love and support for Israel at this time.
And within 20 seconds, Tim, as a historian, Christians have to learn the lessons of history, don't they? And what I mean by that, the treatment of Christians, of the Jewish people during the Middle Ages, and what's happening now.
Absolutely. Now is the time to change. Yep. Now is the time to say, never again is now.
Yeah, excellent. So I just want to thank you both for the first Jerusalem Dispatch ICEJ UK of 2024. You've both done a great job. Thank you so much. And I want to thank you for watching this programme at home. I think it's imperative with this rise of Jew hatred, this marginalisation of Israel and demonisation of Israel, that as Christians we have a biblical perspective and understanding of what God's word says regarding Israel and the Jewish people, and from that be a blessing to the Jewish people and the nation of Israel. And you can do that through the ministry of ICEJ UK. So thank you for watching the first Jerusalem Dispatch of 2024.
Catch the wind, he's carrying